Kate Falcha. Welcome to Irish Granny Tarot. It's time for our Saturday book, and we are continuing book 2 of the Convoluted Universe by Dolores Cannon, and this is video number 5. Okay, so we were on chapter 21, and if for anybody who might have accidentally stumbled on this, if you go back from last Saturday, you'll find the previous videos. So, chapter 21, time portals for future beings, in other words, time travelers. So, she has a subject under hypnosis, and there is some being speaking through the subject, who claims to be a time traveler from the future as best as Cannon can distinguish. And you'll notice that sometimes she'll make assumptions at the beginning of a session, and as the session progresses and more information comes out, she's able to clarify the situation. So it's almost as this is happening in real time. What the book is dialogues, and that verbatim dialogues pretty much. So as a reader, that's how you're receiving the information, and it builds on itself. So it's not that it's contradictory, it's that it evolves as the conversation evolves, just to clarify the confusion. So this being says that we'll call him he, is from one of our probable futures. The premise being decisions get made from free will. We don't know how someone is going to decide from free will, and there are probable outcomes. Provided right choices are made, better outcomes. This being says that they use physical ships, but they also cross dimensions, and that the use of actual physical, like UFO type things, is more as an environmental thing for them, because it's so draining on them to lower their energy to the lower vibrations of the earth, because they're coming from other dimensions most of the time. When they come from actual physical other galaxies or planets, they do it by crossing dimensions, which is how they can do it so quickly. But also, these are more advanced beings in general. And often, we'll hear stories about them being light beings. They're on another planet, somewhere in another galaxy, who've come here. They're so advanced. Their vibratory level is so high. We're going to get into this in a couple of weeks. Their vibratory level is so high that it's draining on them to be on the planet Earth in our atmosphere and our low vibratory situation for any length of time, and rather than go back home and rejuvenate, they have these ships. So they travel into their own past to make changes in civilization that are very subtle. They don't interfere with free will, but they help to direct things. She's told that this is a delicate thing to do. They have to be very careful not to make big changes. Often they just come to observe. They learn from, I guess, like if we went into our past, what would we learn? They use windows to look and portals to pass through. So there are two different kinds of sort of doorways between dimensions. And the windows are the safest for everybody involved. They can't change things, and they can't get hurt. It's not as hard on them. These portals are connected with a thing called time vortexes that exist on Earth. And often they are marked by sacred buildings like temples, Newgrange, Stonehenge, pyramids. Ancient people knew about them and knew better than we. They knew how to use them often. And they had restricted areas. You had to be of a certain vibratory evolution to be able to participate. So she's being told that now is the time for us to regain all this forgotten knowledge, that we're becoming ready to learn it. Cannon was not allowed to give all the details about where these things were, how to get into them, how to access them. They didn't need fools interfering. In New York, she had a client who wanted a session to look at missing time that she had in 1996. And this client was concerned she'd been abducted or something by aliens. She was with a friend walking on a moonlit private beach, and they saw lights in the sky. And the next thing they knew, they were back in their hotel room with missing time. So they went back to the beach and they found their footprints, and their footprints, excuse me, their footprints in the sand just stopped abruptly. Didn't go farther, didn't return, didn't turn around, just stopped. That was kind of weird. So, in trance with Canon, this woman remembers walking on the beach and being passed by a black truck with 4 men on it, driving on the beach. And that sometimes, some beaches, that's possible. And they had no lights on, and she just got a strange vibe from them. They looked up and they saw lights that were much brighter than the moon in the sky. And they came down like a spiral, and they sucked these 2 women up into whatever they were. But the women weren't scared. They found themselves inside some kind of a craft. They went through a doorway. She saw her friend in a different room being shown all these energy colors and receiving information from these colors. We're reminded that color and sound are vibratory. This being with no actual form, just a light thing, tells her telepathically that she was protected because she had been in danger on the beach, and it was because they were close to one of these entrance points that they might have stumbled into, an interdimensional doorway, and some being was charging it up with crystals or something. Anyway, they had stumbled onto a situation that may have not have been good for them. They were told that these beings were from the future, and that it was easy for them, but it was dangerous for humans to involve themselves with this energy, which is why they took them back to their hotel room for their own safety. And that's why they saw the lights and had the missing time. And they were told, listen, it's not always ETs. It could be an intervention of a time traveler, just like we are, to protect you from stumbling into a portal. Cannon was told that she could not reveal a lot about what they told her, so we don't get to know. We're not ready, apparently. They don't want, people showing up to have tailgating parties at the portal, So, she was told that there are many portals underground because they're safer. They're surrounded by rock, they're harder to find. They may look like old tunnels, and there's energy connecting both ends of the portal that people shouldn't mess with unless they're in a state to be prepared to deal with it. And there are many, for example, in Egypt. They were used in the past, and they're used now, and they will be used in the future by time travelers. They'll be rediscovered in our future when we're more ready for it. But right now it would be like a child playing with fire, she was told. These advanced beings don't use them. They manipulate their vibrations. And I'm not quite sure what that means, but that's the statement that was in the book. Cannon says it was a little bit like Star Trek, where people turned to glitter and then just disappeared in order to travel. She couldn't explain it farther, or she wasn't allowed to. Then they told her about the Philadelphia experiment. And if you remember, we've talked a little bit about this, that ship that disappeared, it got moved. When it reappeared, some of the sailors were actually embedded in the metal of the ship, and a lot of the people that were involved in it had emotional problems from what happened. Some never came back. What went on? So Cannon asked these beings about it, and she was told that it was a secret government experiment. This being says that ETs gave the government technology to do it. They used a time portal and a vortex. It worked, but the government didn't really know how to control it. They didn't know how to keep people and the ship separate when they returned. And it wasn't intended by the ETs to be a bad thing. They thought that they were helping, but if there's a way to screw things up, people will figure it out. The government had tried it before with animals. Poor animals. and later learned how to send people through the portal without objects, like without the ship, so that they wouldn't be mixing them together. Then Canon talks to this different subject, a woman named Linda, who I think we've talked about before, and talked with her about time travel. She was at the time ongoing, working with these beings from the future to try to create a better future for us. They came back and contacted people who had the ability to help. They have to be very careful not to change too much. They can't affect births and deaths, and they can't affect big events. They whisper in people's ears, I think is what they're getting at. And they have been positively successful. Next, Canon talked from a subject from Denver in 2003, and he was an observer of the past to gather information. So he had actually reincarnated in this body and was having issues, went to this hypnotist, Canon, only to discover that he'd been sent to observe what was his past, our present, to get information so they could help us. He was bored, and he was having trouble in this lifetime because he was just bored. He would have preferred to have been sent into the future. He described a future city. There was no crowding. They had nice homes. There was no pollution. Machines were used in the homes to provide food and all sorts of different amenities. All information is collected in a central place and shared, and the subject had never felt at home here in this lifetime with this family, and this is why, because he wasn't really from here. And Canon has been told that some scientists from Atlantis were capable of time travel. This was something that people could use in the past. They knew how to manipulate energy. They had the knowledge of how to use crystals and other kinds of energy, and they screwed things up. That's why we lost that knowledge. So then she had a subject named Marie from Australia. Hello, Australia. And this is 2001. She lived on 1,000 acres, and there was a lot of UFO activity in the sky and a portal. It was a very isolated spot. She was told that there was a thing called the drop, which was a light explosion that happened in June or July of 1997. The drop is a waterfall that was close to Marie's house, and there was an explosion there, and the event is also called the drop. She heard rumbling in the water below, and she went to check and see what was wrong. And as she approached, she saw all these weird color lights exploding, and a voice told her to go back now. Don't come any closer. She tried to phone her husband, but the phone was weird. It had crackling and static, a lot like my computer, and she couldn't get through. A neighbor down the valley called to tell her that she saw lights and a cloud and lightning, that it was kind of almost a biblical thing going on in the sky, and another person also saw it. Marie, that night, was really freaked out, and she prayed to understand and heard this information. If it's not too long, I'll read it. Sometimes things sound great in the moment, and then when I look back, it's really too much to be reading out loud. I lay there stunned, she said. The voice said, "You really are a skeptic, Marie." So they told her to look up page 221 in the Keys of Enoch. It's a book she'd been reading, so she did. And this is a quote from the book. "Thus the Merkaba vehicles of light descend upon our planet, whereby a field of light is opened. Whole light beings descend as the magnetic fields of the space-time overlap are controlled. These whole light bodies come down through the artificial time warp zones and land upon the face of the earth. And this is what the ancients beheld when they saw the pillar of the cloud go up from before their face." So that's trying to be an explanation. I would have to look up every single word to fully understand what they're talking about, but it's interaction. Marie showed Dolores, she took her, because Dolores was there, took her to the spot where this all happened. And she says that when she does radio shows, she gets hundreds of emails from people who have experienced this kind of thing. So January 2001, this person, I guess this must be an example, this person talked about seeing a jet and cars in the clouds going forward and backwards, and people in store windows in clothes from 50 years ago. And so there's kind of a discussion of this, and it's complicated and meandering, but essentially what Canon was explaining, what this person was telling her through this being, through this person, was that there's dimensional travel, there's time travel, there's travel through vortexes, and unwittingly, some people with the right energy can stumble onto that, and you may not even, you may do it, and one second you're there, the next second you're back where you belong, you don't even notice it. But sometimes people will see something anomalous. They'll see cars going back and forth, or jet planes going back and forth in the sky, or they'll see people in a store window who look like 70 years ago, and they think they're imagining things or whatever, and the explanation is this is a vortex, a time thing. So now we're on section 7 of the book, Energy Beings and Creator Beings, chapter 22, Mysteries. Well, the whole book, mysteries. There are life forms on other planets in our solar system, but nothing that's exactly like humans, because the environments are not quite right. Similar, but not exactly the same. Once there was life on Mars, they were our ancestors, but all of this will be rediscovered and revealed, but it's going to be slow going. Mars became a stable environment before Earth did. Mars was inhabited, and the inhabitants there had power, and they ended up in a struggle, and they destroyed their own weather system. And we're on the same path. The apple doesn't fall very far from the Mars, I guess. There are some life forms inside Mars, but they're not humanoid, and they're more like a colony of termites than a city of people. And we kind of have this assumption that anything that looks like that would not be advanced or intelligent, and that's a mistake on our part. The red spot in Jupiter is a weather disturbance with its essence in a higher plane of reality. And the reason why we see it is because this is like a different plane of reality right there in that spot. And she's told that there are many different forms of the expression of life that humans are not aware of or don't understand. It may be that what is visible to us of an expression of life, like a footprint on our level, would be experienced as an atmospheric disturbance on the level of other life. It's like a Pixar cartoon of the insects, and they have a whole thing going on that we're not aware of, and humans are monsters. Kind of like that. Simplistic, but kind of like that. There's a colony of viruses or a colony of bacteria on another plane, and this is what we can see of it, but there's a whole life thing going on there. There's not a technological civilization that leaves something that we can see. There are plenty of highly intelligent species, but they are very different forms than what we would be looking for. They're evolved and civilized, and they don't have technology. Remember, she talked at one point about civilizations that had the psychic ability to make stone malleable and levitate stone and build things. And so you're looking at something that looks like prehistoric Stone Age construction, but their abilities were way beyond. I think that's what she's getting at. There's much interconnectedness and balance of all parts of the solar system, that the entire solar system is interdependent. And if we nuke the Earth, if we explode nukes, it affects everything everywhere. And it's going to be prevented to protect other planets, they hope. The asteroid belt was a planet that collided with a meteor. There are potential inaccuracies in the information that Canon is receiving right then, she says, because the subject is not the final word, doesn't have access. This voice that's coming out of this subject may not have all the information, may not be entirely accurate, and it may be determined elsewhere that we're not ready. So, grain of salt. So it doesn't have access to all the channels, and your information that we get is only as good as the physical ability of the subject to convey words. Our language is inaccurate and inadequate. Some information has a frame of reference for which the subject telling the narrative has no words. Then there's a little piece in here about the sun. The true energy of the sun is not heat. It's a byproduct that man cannot understand. That heat is the manifestation of phenomena beyond our comprehension. That's a kind of energy. And there's a transference in the fundamental changes in the energies themselves. I don't know. Sometimes I read this stuff and I read it 4 or 5 times and I think I know what each of those words means, but when you put them together, I'm not entirely sure. So I think what they're saying is the sun is not a gaseous ball of burning hot stuff, but that's how we perceive it. The sun is a belt that all the activity is around it in the belt, but in the core there's a planet like the Earth with civilizations. But it's not hot because the energy on the sun is not what we think it is. The heat is in the belt, and it doesn't burn this core. I bet you there are a lot of scientists who would love to debate this. What do I know? This is what Canon was told. And there's no way to prove or disprove this, but it's certainly food for thought. And that's what I enjoy about these books. I should make that clear. I'm not saying that we have to believe any of this. I'm saying a lot of it does ring true for me. And some of it, like this thing about the sun, I'm not deriding it, I'm not dismissing it, I'm not negating it, but I'm not accepting it without any kind of critical thinking. I'm just mind blown to think about it. She's told that the Big Bang was an explosion when the laws of nature were set. So it's a time in our universe when the physical laws and the nature of nature and the world were set. The theory that the universe will start contracting is true. When the outward motion ceases, it's going to have equilibrium. It's all going to come back and the poles will change. It's a little bit like the laws of polarization and the law of rhythm, you know, in and back and forth. We're going to talk about this. The universe will recede into a void and everything will start over again. I don't think that's going to be next week, though, so I don't think we need to worry about it. It's going to take a very long time. This is the next sentence. It's going to take a very long time. So in a sense, even the universe reincarnates. As above, so below. If the other planet, there is another planet that is being prepared for human Earth life when it may be needed if we keep going the way we're going and there's a disaster. People will even be changed so that the Earth itself can adapt. So it's kind of a twofold solution. The purpose of the shafts of pyramids, they were a way for souls of priests and pharaohs to return to their planetary system, a stargate. And they used technical devices in what's called the King's Chamber, and those devices don't exist anymore. ETs often came to help the early humans. It's possible that the very first pharaohs were ETs and that they kind of got stuck on Earth by karma. They took devices with them when they left because they thought people would misuse them, and I'm sure they were right. The pyramids were used to initiate people in ways to increase their consciousness and increase their vibratory levels, and to learn to use these devices to help the planet. There's a global grid that the pyramids are built on, and it's equal to major connections, major connective system. The pyramids were conductors of universal harmonics, use sound, that connected to other planets in harmony and vibration, and also they worked with colors, sound, and vortices. They were all used together with the pyramids on a grid system for balance and harmonics of our planet and other planets in the galaxy. Emissaries came to help protect us from ourselves. They sealed the chambers to hide the information to protect us from misusing them. We were just not up to the job. There are staggered chambers under the Sphinx that are guarded by energy and frequencies, and she's heard that before. Only certain people would be able to find them, and the energy would kill anybody else who attempted it. So it's not a curse, it's about energy. Let's see. So now we're talking to a woman subject who becomes a male in trance, who is a priest. So I'm going to use the word he, who's into astrology in Babylon. He's on a temple, on a hill, and the main purpose that he has is to chart the stars. They use 4 huge pillars as reference points. It has an open roof, and these pillars are used as reference points to measure the movement of the stars. And they have been studying them for hundreds of years, and they have very accurate star charts. Astrology is used in deciding your reincarnation, so that when we work backwards and go, oh, here's your date you were born, let's figure out your chart, they're taking your chart and deciding when you're going to be born. There are depositories of all knowledge. In 2001, Phil, which is a subject we've talked about in other books of hers, Phil was in a trance, and as he went into trance, so did another woman in the room who Kenan was not trying to hypnotize, but she was so suggestible. Her name was Anne. Phil says that he was met by a being of white light, and is told that there are many beings from other dimensions that help him to understand information, and that that's his job in this lifetime. And he's told that the sun is influenced by reactions on Earth. Energy is being drawn to Earth to compensate for our actions, which is, the whole ozone layer, radiation from the sun, all that stuff is not just a scientific thing. It has to do with our behavior and the energy we put out, how we behave. What we see of our sun in a physical sun is actually a multi-dimensional thing going on. At this point in this trance, the entity in Phil requested that the other woman who had gone under be included in the conversation. So Phil explained that the information was coming from one being using both people. So 2 subjects are talking here on the same topic. So that's why it sounds a little disjointed. The sun is made up of thought energy that's been recorded, and it projects back on the universe and to us. And that's many other suns, the same thing. They are an energy source, but they're a collection of our thought energy. It's chosen by us to remind us of the source that we came from. They use the term God, could also be called source, could also be called the great central sun. The information in suns is not lost. It's transferred to other dimensional levels without physical destruction. As our media are different ways of transferring and storing information. So there are different suns and planets that are depositories of information. Our intensity is what controls the sun. The changes in our planet are controlled by us. Global warming, controlled by us. Energy and information from people are exchanged back and forth from the earth, the Mother Earth, and from people and earth to other planets and the sun. It's a whole system. There's a chain of recordings, information that goes from here to the galaxy to the universe. It's all recorded. All experiences are on the collective. There's no positive or negative. There's experience and what we make of it, what we do with it. And it's all stored, it's imprinted. For example, if a soul is reincarnating and it needs information that didn't get in other incarnations, that it's important for it to have in this lifetime, it might get this information as an imprint. And this is why so many people claim, I was Cleopatra, I was Napoleon. That just means a lot of people are getting that kind of imprint. They weren't living that life. I was always a scullery maid, I have no doubt about it. So our DNA is changing, and our collective DNA, human DNA, is changing, and will eventually be 14 strands. The energy of the earth, and some people, that energy is changing right now. And the change in DNA will help changing our energy. The goal is to raise our vibrations so we can get out of here. And they've discovered that they need to tweak our DNA because we're difficult, we're problem children. So this is an upgrade to accommodate increased energy, because increased energy is having problems communicating with the physical body. So we're a work in process. Our progress. Our DNA strands will form a circle, is what it will eventually look like. It will be high intensity, and it will change our vibratory level. Then we'll be able to transform ourselves from one place of existence to another, like Star Trek. And in Star Trek, they said, okay, well, they're not breaking down, they're redirecting their energy, just to be clear. So we'll be able to choose to use a body if we feel like it, do it part of the time, not use it ever or only some of the time. The body will be an advantage in some circumstances, and they won't need it in others. So she's told that everyone has already chosen this, it's underway, and eventually age will be irrelevant and our energy will be higher. And then she's told, this is April of 2001 that this is all told to her, and she's told that this is happening in about 22 years. Yikes, I can add. She's told in 2001 that this is all happening in 22 years. And it will be noticeable to science. The Human Genome Project is only hinting at it right now. I don't know if that means that they're aware and not saying anything, or they're just getting the tip of the iceberg. Oh, the next sentence is, it has not been expressed by our bodies yet. It's energetic, but they're not seeing it yet. Junk DNA is not junk. It is used, and it's expressing itself. Only some segments are not activated yet. They activate in sort of a domino effect. Indigo children. I tell you a funny story. When my daughter was in graduate school, she had a job at a New Age bookstore, and she used to tell me about people who would come in with their indigo children, and she said it was just painful because many, not all, but many of them were just out of control. But the theory is, and I'm not dismissing this because I actually believe it. I've seen this. There are children who are already on a different level completely. Doesn't excuse bad manners and poor behavior. But there are children who are just beyond. And they already are not victims, subject to the negative effects of being medicated, and they're given drugs for their behavior, and that's really bad. That's not a good solution. And then she's told that only we can change the course of our future and where we go, and that an elevation in our awareness is in the path of God's desires. That there's no need to worry about individual transitions, that it's all being handled by a most competent authority. And I think I would throw that in here, because I know I talk a lot about all the terrible current events and all the bad actors that have control of all of our institutions, and, you know, growing white Christian nationalism and fascism. And yeah, we need to be aware of it. And we're going to talk in the next couple of weeks about why we can't bury our heads in the sand, why we have to acknowledge it. But we're going to also talk about ways of coping with it. But worrying about it and being freaked out about it, that's a different thing. That's not a good use of our time or our energy. And there's a difference between acknowledgement, recognition, and saying, you know, oh, this is terrible, can you believe this? And fretting and losing sleep. There's a difference, at least in my opinion and in my experience, it's different. I don't sit up at night and worry about this stuff. I'm appalled when I read about it. I have to tell people. I know that people need to know. But there's no sense in losing sleep over it or torturing yourself over it. You have to decide where you stand and how you're going to think and what you're going to do, and then move forward. If you come on another awful person, it's okay to acknowledge that they're awful. That's not contributing to the problem. Anyway, chapter 23. Another energy being. So just after 9/11 in 2001, she was in Minnesota with a group of remote viewers, and they knew that they were under government surveillance because, hey, they were remote viewers. So this annual meeting was private and secret, but the day before, some weird people showed up at the door asking very prying questions. So they knew, you know, authorities were onto them. And unusually interested, too, conspiracy theories. So she has a subject named Laura in a trance, and this subject sees lights and shapes, diamonds, geometric shapes and colors, and feels she's inside a machine looking through a round window and surrounded by a halo of light that's all moving around. She's very confused because she has no body. She's in this small machine and she feels comfortable in it. She said the world is full of light and color, and I am a being of colored light. So she knows that she's in some kind of a transport. Some of these stories are strange. She's in some sort of a transport device that can take her anywhere. It sounds a bit like a spaceship. It has loading docks, and it's made of metal, and people in uniform that are not human. But she finds out she is the pilot, and she controls the ship with her mind, which actually, if I remember the stories we read about Roswell, the books we read about Roswell, that was one of the things that they kind of came, Bob Lazar, was that his name? That they could only get so far with engineering because they realized that it was telepathy that they were using. That the pilot became one with the body of the ship in his mind. Group mind is used by the ETs. They join together their energy to travel. The ship was a slender cone, like a rounded pencil. This subject runs errands and delivers messages, and she says, this is where I come sometime. But home is a colored light, and I am all light, and we are all one, and we're all just a part of one. She says, I don't need the craft to travel, but the beings that I go to need to see it to understand that, because they're not quite light beings yet. When I leave, I'm me, and when I'm at home, I am we. It's interesting. She has taken the body of Laura as her ship in this lifetime for a purpose. She says, I was called here, I was needed. I'm going to change things in a subtle way. The planet entity needs help, Mother Earth. The planet is pained, sore, and hurt, and people are too. She says, I balance energy like sculpting, like holding iron filings with a magnet. I keep them from straying. I come from the one to help the earth. I help souls to balance their karma. Laura remembered very early and very well who, what, and why she was here. And this is not that she has bad karma to work off. No, this is her job is to help. And the subject under trance says that Laura, the person, that her memories are accurate, that she is remembering. Then she talks a little bit about angels. Angels are special entities. They don't have gender. They're not guardians. They're not guides. They're people sometimes. Oh, wait a second. They're not guides. Guides are people that she knew in your former life. Angels are a completely different kind of soul. They were with her from the beginning, like a guardian angel, right? And they accompany souls. They're protective entities of the earth, but there are protective entities of the earth. So there's your guides. There are people who were souls who died who stay with you. There are angels who are a different kind of thing. And then there are these other protective entities that belong to the earth, but they're not angels and they're not old souls that died and came back. So she said that it's important to remember to thank them. And she says that Laura, the person, is tired all the time because she doesn't sleep well at night, because when she's asleep, she's not asleep. She's busy helping. And that was an interesting part of her story, was that there are people on earth alive who, when they go to sleep at night, their souls go and help other people, like people who are dying, people who are sick. So then on chapter 24, if you think you create, this is the name of the chapter. And the subject named Richard is in a trance, and he's being greeted by people, and he says he's being welcomed home. He's not on Earth. He is kind of humanoid. He feels peaceful. They're communicating by telepathy, and he says he's sort of made of light and sort of physical. And he starts to cry because he says he's been gone a long time, and this is very emotional. It was like he was on a really long business trip on a job, but he's been on Earth 100,000 years. It's kind of a long business trip. So he's back home to visit friends and has actually gone home on a different frequency. Home is in a completely different dimension. It's physical, but it's a higher vibration. It's more like light. He creates energy, music, colors, and creations like that become physical at lower vibrations. So he's trying to explain vibratory levels. We're going to talk about that later, a couple weeks. He says if you just hold a thought, it creates, and you can bring it down to a lower plane and make it, the lower it goes, the more physical it'll be. And if you hold the intention, it is created. But there's more to it than that. It's not just intention, so we'll get to it. People could do this in a group. People used to do this all the time. They would make a commitment and be constant in the attention and be willing to surrender to the task. And I wrote in the margin with a couple of question marks, oh, like democracy. And actually, that's exactly what he's saying, that, you know, if you get enough people who wanted something and worked together for it and were committed to it and were constant in their attention of it and willing to give themselves to it, it would happen. Beings in his home helped him because in the physical, he sometimes forgets. So he gets spiritual help, vibratory help, while he's here in the physical. He calls his home a starship home base. It's similar to being on the spirit side. He says there is an ascension after a number of lifetimes. The collected lives sort of integrate with all their different experiences, and it's all about raising frequency. Death feels like a disruption to us on this side because we're moving from one experience to another, and the change can be very confusing. People can feel a little lost, but it's an easy rising of vibration with no disruption of consciousness. So it is a confusing experience, especially if you're unaware of what's going on and don't know to expect it. But it's not like you keep your who you are. You keep your consciousness. His life is right now is like when you're freed of earthly cycles and you're living on a higher vibratory level. But he agreed to return. It was a very difficult assignment. It was a real downer. So the whole point of the earthly experiment is about launching individualization and returning with experiences. Humans have been around about 200,000 years. Before that, we were around as different kinds of life forms. And she's told, forget about time. Time is irrelevant. They all tell her that there's a glimmer of hope. We're making a little bit of progress. Earth is just more dense and very difficult. Vibrations are really low. And the good thing about that is there are lots of challenges, lots of opportunities to raise your vibrations. And I wrote here to remind myself to say this, that we have free will and the future is unpredictable. And it's what the tarot cards say all the time. You just don't know what people are going to do. You just can read the vibratory energy, and that's the subtle distinction. If you move away from the earth, the vibrations increase, and as they increase, you become more like spirit, and you raise your vibrations, and you become creators. But you can't skip steps. You can't just, I think I'll be God now. It doesn't work that way. You must have a willingness to give and to contribute. Part of becoming more enlightened is a willingness to help. Free will can be and is misused to create the wrong things. We can tap into our memory. We can tap into lessons of the past, our subconscious, by using meditation or hypnosis. We can talk to others, and just in talking to somebody and having a conversation, you're creating something. And it's good to learn from the past, but then to let it go. Next, she has a subject named Nicole, who finds herself in a cave with spirits not of this earth. They are glowing white lights. So she says that she created this physical cave with her mind. It's on an astral plane. She next finds herself with a tall presence. It's not solid. It moves around. It's not a physical body. I think maybe this is her describing herself. Everything is three-dimensional, but the molecules are held together more loosely, and they're not solid. You could put your hand through them. So it's one of these intermediary vibratory levels. She says she has this energy body. If people saw her, they would see sparkles or a gray smear, like a ghost, like Casper, right? And it just depends on the person. Some people can see that. Some people can't see it at all. In this world, the physical parameters are broader because the molecules are farther apart. She says, if you think, you create. It's important to think and not veg out. This space is concurrent with the earth. We share the same space. We're on different vibratory levels. She's in a place to where she is. She's in that place in order to practice controlling her thoughts and to discover that excessive thoughts can have consequences. She says, on Earth, it's so dense and thought is so slow. Thoughts take a very long time to manifest. In parentheses, I put Republicans. I entertain myself when I'm reading. Thoughts take a long time to manifest because thoughts on the planet Earth are slow. And when it does finally manifest, you may or not be able to change it. So other beings other people even are better able to influence. That's why some people can make things happen and other people just can't seem to make things happen. It's all about the vibration of your thoughts. We just don't have the ability to completely understand this right now. So our growth has to do with integrating all of this stuff and raising our vibrations to a higher level. Now, Nicole, this person that's under trance, has a higher vibration. When she was a child, this is really interesting. When she was a child, she was capable of shape-shifting. And she doesn't. She still could, but she doesn't now because people wouldn't understand. And then the message here is that miracles are possible. So chapter 25, an energy being creates. So 9/11, now you have to remember that a lot of this was written in early 2000s and 9/11 was still a big shockaroo. 9/11 was confirmed by Nostradamus. And after she did a session, she was told that she would be getting more different information, that information was sometimes withheld from her in previous sessions and eventually would be allowed. She said that the entities were pushing for people to stop worrying so much about their past lives and start to move to a higher level of understanding, and sort of, let's not spend so much time hypnotizing people into a trance so they can figure out whether they were Cleopatra. Let's try to figure out what they need to do to move forward and raise their vibrations. We're all higher and more complicated than we realize, even more than just a spirit in a body. We have a whole lot of very important steps on our journey, more important than the earth. We need to get going and do something about it. So she has a subject named Jerry in trance. He finds himself walking down a tunnel to a big door, and the door is made of energy, and he has to remove that block by his mind, if he could only do it, but he's simply not ready yet. So he moves on. He finds himself in a spaceship that the ship itself is alive and has a consciousness. It was created by a group mind in order to travel together. There are living quarters in it that are alive and can interact with the entities and with the energy, and they're all energy and they use their mind to create. They play games like for fun, like changing the colors of things. So we can take any shape, form, or whatever because we're all connected, but we just have lost the knowledge, the capability. These entities made their spaceship for fun. It's an illusion. They're just entertaining themselves. They can create anything. They can create planets. They can create dimensions. Earth is a meeting place for souls, and from other places and dimensions. The Earth has such a low energy, but it's a good portal because it has love. It's a good portal for creation. It's important to experience it because we have emotions. Some places don't have emotions. And if they interact with, if they interact with too much on the earth, they might get trapped. So they have to be very careful. They come here for the experience, but they have to be careful of the experience. They need to remain observers, and that's really hard to do. So we're reminded again that we're all part of the source, that Earth was made close to the source because of the presence of all of the souls. So this subject saw the time of the birth of Jesus as a moment of importance because it brought love that affected many dimensions. It was like a portal. It drew angels and many beings. It drew ETs and different races from other places. And this being has chosen to be in the physical many times. It's a process for souls to come here and then learn from being here, but at the same time not to get trapped by karma. And they always start out basic. You don't start out king of the world. You start out as plants or rocks, and then animals and other spirits, and then you move on. We need to remember that concept and start honoring the earth as a living being, because it is. So these energies, these entities are all still telepathic, even when they're in human form. The energy that holds them in their body is kind of a group experience. Being in a body is very limiting, lower energy experience. We've all been trapped here by karma. We come to understand and we end up getting stuck. The soul can splinter to incarnate. The physical has limits, and when the soul is in the physical, it becomes aware of its totality, and it concentrates on an energy being that can create anything it desires, and it evolves and could be many places at once. So what this is saying, and it's very confusing, but what it's saying is that souls can be here on doing their business, and we're not aware of this on a conscious level, but our soul might decide, oh, well, I have more to learn than just this, and splinter, not totally separate or something, but have two experiences at the same time to kind of augment what's going on here on the earth, and it helps evolution. We have this ability. We're just not aware of it. We're not aware of what's going on large portions of the time currently. So while we're in the physical, we're too limited. Souls need to focus on their experience here on the earth. On a conscious level, there's nothing. You might maybe have a partial soul memory, some people, and be kind of frustrated or feel out of place, or feeling of separation is how this would manifest, this memory, but it's really pretty subtle. The subconscious knows, but the conscious does not. So that's the end of this chapter, and I'm going to stop here because it's almost been an hour. Go get a snack. And we'll start video 6 here in a minute, and I hope you're enjoying this. And I apologize that some of this is a little kind of stream of consciousness. Well, that's exactly what it is. It's repeating these trance-like states, and the information that's coming out sometimes doesn't have full cohesion for another couple of decades. So I hope I'm making it as clear as I can, and I would really recommend reading the books. They do help a little more. There is a little more description. They're not always this clear, linear narrative, which is why reading them will help to sort of assimilate what you've heard. Read it, it helps a lot. Even just going over these notes, I think, God, did I read that? Okay, I'll be back. Thank you for watching. Sondafoil.